Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Guns Magazine Live podcast. I'm your host, Brent T, and welcome to one of America's biggest gun talk programs as we meet the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting. Well, you can tell we're not in our normal configuration, our normal studio. We are at the 2025 SHOT Show, and this is Friday, the last day of the SHOT Show, and everybody's trying to run out the door, and I grabbed this guy, and you may not know his face, but I'm sure you know his byline. It's Wayne van Zwoll. And Wayne is one of the elder statesmen of the gun writing community. Wayne's been there, done that, and done it all. So I thought that might be an entertaining podcast to get Wayne set down. And he was reluctant to do this. He doesn't like to talk about himself, but we're going to make him talk about himself. So, Wayne, welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast.
Thank you, Brent. It is good to be here.
Well, excellent. And you write the optics column for Guns Magazine. I think do you write for Tom?
I have.
Okay.
Yes.
You've written for everybody at this point.
It almost seems that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, let's just start at the beginning. How did Wayne van Zwoll get interested in becoming a gun writer?
Well, I was interested in firearms from an early age. My parents weren't, and so I had to buck that trend. And but I built a deer rifle when I was just out of high school on a $15 SMLE 303, and yes, and managed to kill a deer with it, and I like to write, and published a magazine article in 1977 about a deer I killed with a bow and arrow, and that launched me. Yeah. I got $75 for that article, and I thought, gosh, I could make a living writing.
Exactly. So you've been doing it ever since then. Is this your full-time thing, or you still got something on the side?
Actually, I do a few other things, but mostly volunteer. This is the only work that I'm doing now, and has been for the last 20 years. So
you've hunted every place. Didn't you were a guide for a while, weren't you?
I did guide hunters for elk and deer in Wyoming and in Utah as well for a few years. During my I worked on a doctorate, finished my doctorate in 2000, actually late in life.
Well, I didn't know you were a doctor.
Well, I'm not a real doctor, as they say, just a Ph.D.
That's good, because I got something you need to look at here. No,
but yes, and I was fortunate to live in, study in country that had a lot of elk, so I did do that part-time.
So you're kind of known as an elk guy. Is that your favorite species to go after? Or if you have a busman's holiday, what would be your choice?
Elk are hard to beat, especially in September during the rut, late September, and with a bow and arrow or an iron-sighted rifle. Getting close is more than half the fun.
Yeah. Well, we just got back from a hunt in western Oklahoma, and Wayne and I actually roomed together, and we were both successful. We told a lot of stories that I hadn't heard. You were telling about going into the backcountry of Idaho, miles on the horse and chasing elk and dodging grizzlies. And is that kind of how you go elk hunting? I mean, do you do the full meal deal all the way into the places most folks don't ever get to?
I have done that. Yes, it's not always that way, because sometimes when you go too far back, you actually meet people coming in from the other side, pack trains,
Yeah.
And so actually some of the best elk hunting is done between a mile and 2 or 3 miles from a road.
Aha!
Just far enough to get away from people who don't want to pack an elk out more than a mile. And then the elk soon find where the pressure is light.
Exactly. So of this lifetime of hunting all over the place, is there one you can pick out as the one that you always kind of sit back and think that was the highlight right there?
It's hard, each hunt, and they don't always have to be successful hunts, not in ending in a kill. And I've hunted in Africa and in the far north, and some of those have been adventures more. They've turned out to be more adventures than successful hunts, and so you remember those sharply. Yeah.
Well, it was funny. We were hunting, and we got on the topic of long distance shooting, and you're certainly a long distance capable of long distance shooting, but you're like me, you try to get in close, and we were talking about guys that brag about the 600, 700, 800 yard shot, and you had the greatest line as a comeback when you said you always say to those guys, well, someday you'll get better and you can get closer. I've always remembered that, and I've used that line a couple of times. So, talk about your feelings about long distance hunting. You're a Western guy. You've hunted, stuff that you've had to take long shots, but kind of, what's your feelings about this new emphasis on long distance hunting?
Well, I wrote a book on long range shooting, and I've written about that in magazines as well. Long range shooting teaches you a lot about trajectory, wind drift, and mirage, reading the elements and compensating, and it gives you less and less margin for error the farther you get out. So you see your failings at long range where you might not at short, and so in that respect, it's a good teaching tool. And I enjoy shooting. I've shot at rocks at a mile away, and where there's country to do that. I have a friend in Wyoming who has a range that gives you that latitude, and I enjoy it, but I don't shoot at game. I've only shot at a couple of animals at over 400 yards, and those were special cases.
Sure.
So I really think that, to me, a 400-yard shot is a very long shot. 300 yards is quite a poke, actually, for most people. And it depends not just on your rifle's capability or that of the ammunition, but on your ability to dope conditions and to hold the rifle still when you break the shot.
Yeah.
And that is such an overlooked element of long-range shooting. Yep. I try to point that out.
Exactly. And it's the rare person that can shoot up to the ability of their rifle.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I am convinced that most shooters can't hold 2 minutes of angle under most hunting conditions.
Wow.
And at 400 yards, you're still just inside the vitals of a deer.
Yeah.
But at 800 yards, you aren't.
Exactly.
And 1,000 and beyond is very, very far.
And that's kind of the issue I take with it, and we talked about this, is, it's one thing if you miss a target. Okay, you missed a target, but when you're talking a living, breathing animal, our goal is to make a clean harvest. It's not to just put a bullet in flesh. And especially when you're talking at those distances, you may not find that animal because it may be clear across a valley. So, I know we'll probably get some hate mail from the guys. Oh, I've taken 12 deer at over 1,200 yards. Well, good for you if you can do it. But I think sometimes as an industry, as gun writers, we present a skewed picture of what a good shot should be.
I'd agree with that, and I don't like to get hate mail either. But I've heard people comment, well, if you have the equipment and you're steady and you're on a bipod, and well, at that point, are you really hunting? You're taking a shot at over great distance at an animal that can't possibly know you're there.
Yeah.
Because if you're 1,000 or beyond, and actually in many cases much closer than that. So is it really hunting? It's more shooting.
Yeah.
And if you always make kills, and if you're very careful and shoot within the limits of the equipment and your ability in those positions, I don't have any criticism, but I also have seen, as a guide and as a hunter, I've seen people take irresponsible shots, and I've missed game at exceptionally close range. So I missed a deer at 14 feet once, but that's another story. Did I say that on the air?
Yeah.
Good night. What's wrong with me?
Well, and I hadn't planned to go down that side road, but that's one of the things and I think our audience really appreciates it. Gun writers are noted for varnishing, polishing, and spinning the truth sometimes. And what I like is our writers are absolutely honest. And if I ask you to write that story, you would write it and say, yeah, I missed a deer at 14 yards. It's none of this, yes, he was running at 1,200 and I jumped up offhand and made a perfect kill at, no. It could happen. But I've personally not seen that kind of stuff with my eyes, but I have seen some known people that did some pretty poor shooting that you didn't see that in the article later. So I really appreciate the truth, and I know our readers do. So it's wonderful that a guy like you who has again, you're one of the elder statesmen of this entire industry, and for you to admit that, but we're all human,
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
make mistakes. And, my rule of thumb is irrespective, the effective range of yourself as a rifleman, it depends so much on conditions. Are you shooting prone or offhand? Are you steady or aren't you? Is the wind blowing? Is it not? How much of the animal do you see? And how much time do you have? All of those are variables. And my rule of thumb is if I could make that shot under these conditions, 9 times out of 10, I'll take the shot.
Sure.
But it has to be really that sure, or I feel it's irresponsible to do it, because I've lost animals. I've seen a lot of animals lost. I try like heck not to do that. I don't think it doesn't present our sport in very favorable light.
Exactly.
When non-hunters see that or know that, and so I think it's in our best interest to be responsible with our shooting.
Exactly. We're all ambassadors of the sport. We get the byline and the YouTube views, but every one of us that are out there hunting are ambassadors for what we do. So switching gears here, you are our optics editor, and you have an every other month column in Guns about optics. Okay, what fascinates you? You get into some really stuff that a guy who is math challenged has a hard time understanding, but you know what you're talking about. So what is it about all that really fascinates you?
Well, I started writing about optics quite a long time ago and wrote a book on it. And just studying optics, you realize, as you just implied, that you can get out of your depth very quickly. I was out of mine, and so I had to learn. I studied it, and good optical studies have been made since the days of Galileo. And of course the first optics were made for studying stars.
Right.
And we think of optics as all being contained in a tube. Binocular, rifle scope, spotting scope, but in the early days they didn't have tubes. They just had lenses spaced on bars, and the images they got weren't very clear, but they did know that they pretty soon, this is a long time after they discovered glass, that you could magnify images and thereby identify them better, even if they weren't very clear. And over time, with this discovery by Zeiss in the 1930s of magnesium fluoride coatings that actually sharpened your images because they made them brighter. That was a big development, and now we have multi-coated lenses which use more than one rare earth to compensate for aberrations along a variety of wavelengths. So all of that, we think of almost every optic as being brightening our picture, but it's true that uncoated glass loses up to 4% of its incident light at every lens surface throughout an optic. And if you have several lenses, which binoculars and rifle scopes do, you can see that you lose a tremendous amount of light just in getting that image. And that's what the Zeiss people discovered in 1930, and the coatings have pretty much helped. Well, they've helped a great deal. And now, these days, it seems everybody wants a very high-powered scope for hunting. And in my view, I've just found that perhaps I'm a dinosaur, but a straight 4-power scope is just fine for me. Even the 2.5 or a 3, but it's hard to find those now. They're getting heavier and longer.
What? You mean you don't use a 18 by 24? 60 millimeter. Yeah, okay. I get it. So I'm going to put you on the spot now. This is Meet the Writer, Wayne van Zwoll, and I know you're going to shift uncomfortably, but Wayne, what's your absolute favorite rifle caliber?
Oh boy, there are so many good ones,
Of course there is, but what's Wayne's favorite?
Well, I will say that the two that have a centennial this year, the 270 Winchester and the 300 Holland & Holland, are two of my favorites. And I have to mention them because of their age now. And so, and they've been exceedingly popular over the years as well, especially the 270.
Okay, then follow that up. Favorite rifle?
Boy, that's hard. The early model 70s have always been a favorite of mine. and the Mauser, the 98 Mauser in various forms, from which we've borrowed heavily here in the States. But those two, if I were to build a custom rifle, those would be the actions I'd use.
Yeah. So this is another kind of memory question, and it could be a story, a hunt, an event, a person you met. Is there one moment that you find yourself thinking about a lot when you start, when somebody says, oh, well, I've read you forever and, you must have done a lot of stuff. Is there one thing that pops in your head of thinking, that was a cool moment, oh, I'm always going to remember that?
If I seem at a loss for words, it's almost like admitting that I haven't had any cool moments. I've failed that often. But I have actually, I've passed up animals that I could have shot.
Sure.
And those remain as sharp in memory as some of the animals I've killed.
Yeah.
And whether I passed them up because I felt the distance was too long, or I just wanted it to grow another year.
Yeah.
The experience of being in the woods, in the fields, on the mountain, is a real privilege, and we Americans sometimes don't recognize that.
Exactly.
If you travel much in Europe, for example, which has some beautiful country, the hunting is really quite limited and very expensive, and not available to everyone. And so just our ability here to get in the field with a good rifle or a good shotgun, good handgun, that's a privilege. So when I came out of the field last year, after an unsuccessful elk hunt, measured by killing anyway, I thought, gosh, I carried a really a nice rifle in some beautiful, beautiful country that it's one of the most remote places in the lower 48, 30 miles by pack train in and 40 miles out the other way. So,
wow.
You're in the middle of real wilderness.
Yeah.
I thought, what a privilege to be there, to be able to hike the trails with a rifle with a license in your pocket.
Yeah, exactly. You were saying, I was thinking as you were talking that I've had one hunt that it's completely insignificant, but ended up, there was a buck that I was drawn down on, and it was one of those late, last day of the season, and I actually did it. Bang, just said it, and he ran off, and I felt good about that. And I've told a couple people, they're like, "What's wrong with you?" But it felt right at the moment, and I don't regret it.
Sure.
So, well, let's go the other direction, and you may have to be careful about the naming the people involved or the place, but anyone that sticks out is like maybe either the low moment on a media trip, because we go on media trips and we're blessed to do that, but not every one of them is an A1 gold star. So any trips or just hunting trips in general where you're thinking, maybe I want to start selling paint at Walmart.
I've never been to that point, but there's some, and it's easy to criticize other people until you goof, as I have many times,
right.
And then you hold your tongue. But I remember a client, on an elk hunt, came with a very heavy 300 Winchester Magnum rifle, and sat at the bench and punched one hole groups, checking his zero. And I thought, well, he'll be fine, although the rifle is quite a beast to carry into a canyon. And he did get the rifle into our canyon that we were hunting, but then when the elk appeared at 175 yards, which is pretty much a chip shot when you're waiting for one, and he comes out where you think he will. He hit it poorly, and he used almost an entire box of ammunition firing at it as it moved up the other side, and eventually killed it. But it was really messy, and he was so exhausted by the effort of getting in and then the event itself that we had to carry the rifle out for him. And I'm thinking, here was a rifleman, obviously knew about rifles and could shoot, but he was not a hunter yet, and he didn't limit his shot to the limits imposed on himself, as well as the rifle.
Well, and that's one of the situations. Nobody feels good going out. You feel bad for them. You're a little resentful. He's embarrassed, and it's it makes for a rough day for everybody. So in the time we've got left here at the 2025 SHOT Show, which is like virtually no time left on the show, but I'm going to ask you the big think question. What should folks who read your writing and have maybe read it for a long time, what do they need to know about Wayne van Zwoll? Who are you as a hunter, as a shooter, as a person? What should folks know?
Wow.
I don't ask the easy questions.
That's a tough one.
I'm supposed to be a trained interviewer.
Yeah. Well, I think that we can all be better than we are if we work hard at it, and we can pursue dreams that we once thought were impossible if we work hard at it. And whether you succeed or you fail as a marksman or as a hunter, whether you get records book heads or not, that's becoming increasingly dependent on your financial wherewithal. But you can still be a good person. And I think a good reputation, it's biblical, is to be valued above all. And so if people remember you well, and if you're remembered well by the people you like, that's a great blessing. And I try to live like that. And, I shoot as well as I can. That's all I can do.
Yeah. Well, great place to end it. And I certainly appreciate you coming by and staying after so we could record this. And I'm not going to ask you the usual question. What did you see at the SHOT Show? At this point, anybody that's been to the SHOT Show, you don't remember what you saw. You don't know, you don't remember who you talked to. So, but we know it's been a very successful SHOT Show for everybody. So, Wayne, appreciate you coming by, and folks can read you every other month for sure in Guns Magazine. Plus, he does a lot of features for us. So check out Guns Magazine, gunsmagazine.com. And we will see you next week on the Guns Magazine podcast.